On my wedding day, my mom texted, "Don't expect anyone to show." Then I saw the group photo, all of them on a private beach in Maui. Caption, finally together. I just sent one text. Perfect timing. That night, I pulled my name off the business charter, froze every corporate expense account. A week later, my dad was outside my condo, red-faced and pounding on the door. I opened it, sipped my coffee, and said, "At this point, I don't even know what to call them. Family? That word doesn't fit anymore. You don't ghost someone's wedding and still get to wear that title. You don't fly to a private beach, toast champagne in the sun, and pose for a group photo on the same day your only son says his vows, and still call that love. I don't know what they are to me now. But they're not family." That ended the moment I saw the photo. Let me rewind. The morning of my wedding, I was standing in the small dressing room at our venue, this rustic little lodge on the coast, nothing fancy, but peaceful. I was adjusting my cufflinks when I got a text from my mother. "Don't expect anyone to show. Best of luck." No punctuation, no context, just those words. I stared at the screen for a solid minute thinking it had to be a mistake. I actually checked the sender like I didn't recognize her number. I even turned off my phone and turned it back on, like maybe I'd read it wrong. But no. That was it. That was my send-off from the people who raised me. Natalie was down the hall getting ready. She had no idea. She thought they'd be arriving late. I never told her the full truth about how they reacted to her. When we got engaged, my mom called her scrappy, and my dad said she wasn't a strategic match. I didn't even know people talked like that outside of arranged marriages or corporate boardrooms. They didn't like that her family wasn't wealthy, that her dad drove a truck and her mom worked retail, that she came from a small town. They smiled in public and called her names behind closed doors. But I thought maybe, deep down, they'd come around. They didn't. I kept checking the entrance as the ceremony started. The seats reserved for my side of the family stayed empty. Every single one. Not even a text from my sister. The same sister who once told me I saved her life during her divorce. She couldn't be bothered to send an excuse. But Natalie, God, she looked beautiful. She smiled like she had the whole world figured out. I focused on her. I didn't let them ruin it. At least not visibly. We got through the vows. We kissed. Everyone cheered. The reception was small but joyful. Her family danced for hours. Our college friends toasted us with cheap champagne and corny stories. Nobody asked about my side of the aisle. Maybe they figured something came up. Later that night, I stepped outside to grab a beer from the cooler and get a little air. That's when I saw it. The post. My cousin, who apparently never figured out how privacy settings work, uploaded a picture that hit harder than anything my family had ever said to my face. There they all were. Standing on a private beach in Maui. Waves behind them. Sunglasses, sundresses, open collars. My parents, my sister and her husband, 2 aunts, even my dad's business partner, who's not even blood. Glasses raised, arms around each other, tan and glowing. It looked like a damn catalog photo. The caption read, "Finally together. Love wins. #family forever." They didn't just skip my wedding. They orchestrated a parallel celebration. A family event without me. They waited until my exact wedding day to do it. Then posted it, like they wanted me to see it. Like it was some kind of message. I walked back inside, kissed Natalie on the cheek, and danced until midnight. Then I went quiet. The following Monday, I showed up to the office like nothing happened. The receptionist said good morning. I smiled. Walked straight into my office. My name was still on the charter. I still had all the admin keys. I still controlled the corporate cards, the joint expenses, the assets I helped build from the ground up with my dad. By noon, I filed the paperwork to remove myself from the business entity. By 4, I froze every corporate expense account tied to the family. Phones. Gas. Flights. Hotels. All of it. I made sure it would hit them midweek, right as they were wrapping up their trip. The group chat started lighting up like a fire alarm by early evening. My dad texted first. Then my sister. Then the calls started. I ignored everyone. I was sitting on the couch with my wife, eating leftover cake. Finally, I sent one message back. Perfect timing. Then I turned my phone off and opened a bottle of wine. There was nothing left to say. A week of silence. That's all it took for them to crack. After the photo. After the text. After the wedding. After I froze the expense accounts and erased myself from the business we spent 10 years building together. I didn't pick up a single call. Not one reply to the frantic messages piling up in my inbox. Not even when my sister texted asking if I'd gone insane. I just watched quietly from the outside as the cracks started to show. Natalie noticed something had shifted, but she didn't ask. She knew enough to know that if I hadn't said anything yet, it wasn't ready to be spoken. We were still settling into married life. Small routines. Coffee in the morning. Cooking together at night. She picked up a freelance gig and filled the space in the apartment with energy I didn't realize I'd been missing all these years. We were happy. Tired but happy. Then came the knock. It was around 6:50 in the morning, still hazy outside, and I was in the kitchen in a t-shirt and boxers, drinking my first cup of coffee, when the pounding started. Sharp, loud, like someone wanted the door off its hinges. I didn't have to guess. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, there he stood. My father. Red-faced, dressed in his usual overpressed shirt and designer slacks, like he thought showing up in business attire would give him some kind of authority. His tan hadn't faded yet. The Maui sun still clung to his skin like an insult. He didn't ask to come in. Didn't ask how I was. Didn't even say hello. He just launched into it. Yelled about how I'd embarrassed him. How I'd crippled the family. How freezing the accounts mid-trip left them stranded, and how they had to cover costs with personal credit cards. He said my sister and her husband had just put a down payment on a second property, assuming the cash flow would keep coming. That I had no right. That I'd thrown a grenade into everything. I stood there, sipping coffee. When he paused long enough to breathe, I said calm and clear, I gave you every chance. You made your choice. That was the moment something shifted in him. His rage turned bitter. He started accusing me of being emotional. Said I was making a scene out of nothing. That skipping one event wasn't worth tearing the family apart. He kept calling it a difference of opinion. Like what they did wasn't calculated. Like it didn't come with consequences. He said I owed him. That he built the company from nothing. That he gave me the tools to succeed. That I was nothing without him. That's when I knew we never speak the same language. I told him the charter changes were final. That the holding company now controlled my shares and would not be reversing any decisions without compensation. If they wanted the business whole, they could buy it back, at market rate, cash up front. I told him the cards weren't coming back. The sell plans, the company car leases, the travel accounts, all frozen indefinitely. He asked what I expected them to do. I said, figure it out. Then I closed the door. He stood there pounding again, yelling my name, shouting threats I'd heard versions of before. I didn't open it. I sat back down, finished my coffee, and scrolled through photos from the wedding. Not a single one featured my family. But every one of them showed joy. Later that afternoon, I called the attorney and set up a firewall on the rest of my financial interests. I shut off every shared access point, revoked every family member from my personal accounts, and canceled the autopay for the secondary property my sister had just moved into. She was using my name to secure the rate. Not anymore. They'd been living off me for years without even realizing it. They got used to things just appearing, trips, investments, bailouts. I had quietly kept the wheels turning while they posed on beaches and whispered about my wife not being our kind of people. Now the gears were stopping. And they were going to feel every rotation slowed to a halt. It started small, just a few missed payments. The company's shared car lease bounced first. I knew because the dealership called my personal line out of habit. Then one of the vendors flagged an overdue invoice and emailed the business account I still monitored silently. Then the office building sent a warning about late rent. I didn't say a word. I just watched. By week 2, they were scrambling. I could see it in the group chat, my sister begging for someone to cover the utilities for the lake house this month, and my dad replying with vague promises. My aunt chimed in, saying her card got declined trying to book a trip to Scottsdale. My cousin asked if the company still covered his insurance. No one was getting real answers. And they still hadn't said the one thing I was waiting to hear. Not a single apology. Instead, they acted like something happened to them. Like I'd vanished without cause. Like I hadn't spent a decade quietly managing the financial strings they all took for granted. I was the one who set up the tax shields, the real estate trusts, the expense pipelines. They never understood how any of it worked. They didn't care to. They just used the cards, signed the forms I gave them, and assumed it was endless. Then the mortgage issue hit. My sister and her husband had bought a new property in a suburban development. Big place, shiny lawn, probably 3 bathrooms. I'd co-signed quietly a year ago, back when we still talked. She never asked directly, she just cried about not getting approved and I filled in the gap. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. Now, with the accounts locked and her income suddenly under review, the bank flagged the arrangement. The terms fell apart. They couldn't meet the new deposit window. I got the notification because, legally, my name was still on the contract, until I had it removed. That was a fun call. The loan officer asked if I was still interested in backing the property. I told him no. Not anymore. 3 days later, she called me. My sister. After complete silence since before the wedding. No. Congrats? No. Sorry we missed it. No acknowledgement. Just, you can't do this to us. Us. I didn't even answer. Just let it ring out and block the number. That night, Natalie and I ate dinner on the couch and watched reruns while her head rested on my shoulder. She still didn't know all of it. I didn't feel like she needed to. What mattered was we were good. We were building something real. The next week, I heard from our old accountant. A guy I liked, someone who always played it straight. He said the quarterly reports were a disaster and asked if I'd really pulled all access. I said yes. He was quiet for a second, then said, I wondered when you'd finally stop carrying them. That stuck with me. Because he was right. I'd been carrying them for years. Quietly, fully, without resentment, until they made it impossible not to see the truth. And now? Now I was just letting go. 3 weeks after the wedding, the silence began to warp into something else. Not apology. Not remorse. Just quiet calculations behind closed doors. They were clearly trying to find a way back into control, but without facing the truth. Typical. I was working late from home, finalizing paperwork for a startup I'd quietly invested in months ago, something I'd never told my father about. It was the first time I felt genuinely excited about a new direction. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender's name didn't ring any bells. Subject line: Request for private conversation regarding family affairs. I opened it. Inside, some slick wording about wanting to meet for coffee and discuss a potential path forward. It took a moment, but I realized the sender was one of my father's longtime business contacts, an old guy I'd seen once at a board meeting when I was 22. A professional mouthpiece. He even included a line that made me laugh out loud. I believe there's still a way to preserve legacy without sacrificing personal values. I didn't answer. 2 days later, I got another email, this time from a law firm. They sent over a PDF titled, Proposal for Reintegration of Partnership and Brand Stabilization. That was their title. Not apology. Not we were wrong. Just stabilization. Like I was a stock that dropped too fast. The document was dense. Basically, they were offering to bring me back as an independent strategic lead, with a hefty salary, my shares reinstated, and a public announcement about renewed collaboration. I kept scrolling, half bored, until I hit the final clause, neatly buried at the bottom. Reinstatement subject to realignment of personal affiliations in conflict with brand image or long-term partner confidence. It didn't say Natalie's name, but I didn't need it to. They wanted me back, but only if I erased the one person who showed up when none of them did. The woman who stood beside me when every single blood relative disappeared. I closed the laptop without responding. The next night, Natalie and I were walking back from dinner. Just the two of us, holding a leftover box between us, laughing about some guy at the restaurant who kept loudly pitching a podcast idea no one asked to hear. We turned the corner onto our block, and froze. My mother was standing outside the building. Not dressed for confrontation. No suitcase. No umbrella. Just standing there like she'd been waiting for hours. Her hair was done. Her makeup was carefully subtle, like she wanted to look unpolished but not by accident. I hadn't seen her in person in almost a year. She didn't say hello. Just looked at me, then at Natalie, then back at me again. I came alone, she said. Your father doesn't know I'm here. I didn't respond. She said she wanted to fix things? That this had gone too far. That the business was suffering and no one was talking to each other, and it was time someone acted like the adult. I said, You didn't come to fix anything. You came to negotiate. That's when she said it. Not loudly. Not in anger. Just a sentence she clearly rehearsed. I think deep down, you know she's not part of the future we built. It was so calm, so matter-of-fact, that it actually stunned me more than if she'd screamed. Natalie didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I just stepped forward, looked my mother in the eye, and said, You made that future without me the second you walked off that plane in Maui. Then I turned, took Natalie's hand, and walked past her. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. But later that night, around 1:30 a.m., I got another email. From the same firm. Subject line: Urgent, intent to sue for breach of fiduciary duty. That's when I knew they weren't done trying to fight. And that's when I realized I hadn't even started. When the envelope landed on my desk, I didn't feel much. Not anger. Not surprise. Just a kind of tired confirmation. Thick, cream-colored paper. My name typed in bold. Formal language wrapped around the threat. My father and his lawyer were filing for breach of fiduciary duty. They claimed I had sabotaged the family business, intentionally interfered with operations, caused reputational harm, and jeopardized shared assets. It was nonsense. But legally shaped nonsense. I handed it off to my attorney, Lena. She didn't flinch. She was the kind of lawyer who used silence better than most people used words. After scanning the first page, she looked up and said, They're trying to box you in before they collapse. I nodded. So let's let them collapse. She started building a counter immediately. What they underestimated, what they always underestimated, was that while they were flying first class and golfing with clients they couldn't name, I was the one keeping everything upright. I had all the documentation. Expense records, internal emails, proxy notes, even audio from board calls. I had time-stamped proof of every task they delegated to me because they didn't want to deal with it. And I wasn't going to shout or threaten. That wasn't necessary. Collapse doesn't always come from fire. Sometimes it's the water leaking behind the walls. I made one call to our logistics partner. A guy named Dennis I'd worked with for years. We'd had beers together. I told him, off the record, that he might want to hold off on fulfilling the next few bulk shipments. That things were unstable. He didn't ask questions. Just said, Got it. Then came the real estate play. They forgot I still had partial signature rights on the commercial lease for our headquarters. I didn't even need to threaten. I just notified the building owner that I would no longer personally guarantee rent coverage, and that there was potential financial turbulence incoming. Within 72 hours, the management company served them with a notice, pay 3 months in advance or prepare to vacate. I didn't need to lift another finger. They weren't liquid enough to cover that kind of demand. Quietly, the walls started closing in. Then came the international partner. He only stayed in because of my involvement. The moment I sold my last shares in the satellite entity, he pulled his investment. It wasn't personal. He even sent me a short note saying, Saw the writing on the wall. You did the right thing. My cousin messaged me that night. First time I'd heard from him since the wedding. He said, Whatever point you're trying to prove, it's made. You've burned everything down. He was wrong. I hadn't burned anything. I just stopped watering their garden. But then something happened I didn't expect. I got an email from a woman who worked in HR at a mid-sized accounting firm. Said she couldn't say much officially, but she thought I'd want to see something that came across her desk. We met at a diner the next morning. She slid a folded paper across the table. A printed screenshot from their onboarding system. My sister had applied for a financial consultant position. Under her resume, she'd listed herself as managing director of our company for the last 4 years. She'd even added bullet points: client strategy, revenue growth, operational oversight. Total fiction. She'd also used my name and personal number as her professional reference. I stared at the page for a while. Then I looked up and asked the woman, Did she actually interview? She nodded. She was confident. A little too confident. I smiled. Yeah. That tracks. I sent my sister one message as I left the diner. Don't ever use my name again. No threats. No drama. Just that. She didn't reply. But within an hour, her LinkedIn profile vanished. Her account went private. Mutual contacts stopped tagging her in anything. The funny part was, I wasn't even angry. I wasn't surprised. I think I just felt done. For the first time in my life, I wasn't checking behind me. I wasn't cleaning up their mistakes. I wasn't softening the blow. I was just walking forward. And whatever was behind me could fall as far as gravity wanted to take it. By the time spring rolled in, the family business had quietly folded. No bankruptcy filing. No scandal in the papers. Just closed doors and disconnected phones. The website came down one day without fanfare. A few of their old clients probably wondered what happened. Most didn't. They moved on. That's how business works. People think legacies last forever, but they don't. They last as long as someone's willing to keep holding them up. And I let go. Natalie and I had moved into a new place by then. Nothing extravagant, just bigger windows, more light, a kitchen she actually loved. She started taking on more creative work, and I found myself spending less time in old spreadsheets and more time doing things I never used to make room for. Dinners with friends. Long walks. Silence. The lawsuit never went anywhere. Lena shut it down so fast, I barely had time to read their reply. They tried to stall, tried to delay discovery, but the second they realized I wasn't bluffing, and that I had everything documented, they withdrew. Quietly. No apology. Just silence. That was fine. They weren't good at apologies anyway. One last ripple came from my father. He sent a letter, actual pen and paper, mailed to my office. No return address, no date. Just a rambling mix of excuses, nostalgia, and some warped version of our past. He wrote about the early days, when we drive out to distribution centers in the middle of nowhere. How we built something out of nothing. He said he missed those days. Said maybe we could go back to them. Then he ended with a line that told me everything I needed to know. I still believe we were right to protect the family from outsiders. Outsiders. Even after everything fell apart, he still saw my wife, the one person who stood beside me, as a threat. As someone who didn't belong. I folded the letter once, dropped it into the trash, and that was the last time I ever acknowledged him. That summer, Natalie and I took a road trip. No destination. Just highways, music, gas station coffee, and nowhere to be. Somewhere in Colorado, we stopped at a little cabin on a lake. No cell service. No emails. No expectations. On the last night, we were sitting on the dock, feet in the water, and she asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to them again?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I think they already said goodbye. They just didn't realize it." Because the truth is, the day they chose that beach over my wedding, they made the cleanest break they ever could have. They handed me freedom in the ugliest wrapping possible. I unwrapped it. I used it. And I didn't look back. It's been almost a year since I walked away. No contact. No updates. No drama. Just distance. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. A clean break. Me, Natalie, a quiet life built from the ashes of whatever that family used to be. I didn't realize something was still out there, something quietly circling back. It started with an email. Not from any of them. It was from a man named Jeremy Heller. I didn't recognize the name at first, but when I opened the message, everything stopped. Jeremy was an associate at a firm in Boston handling a private trust connected to my grandfather's estate. My grandfather, the only person from my dad's side who ever treated me like I mattered. He died 10 years ago. I thought everything he had went directly to my parents. Turns out it didn't. Jeremy wrote that certain assets had been held in a secondary trust, frozen until my 35th birthday. They were part of a contingency plan my grandfather put into place after a falling out with my father. I had no idea any of this existed. He never talked about it. But according to the documents Jeremy attached, he didn't trust what the family had become. So he created a clause. If by a certain date I was no longer actively involved in the family business, and had severed financial ties, the full trust would default to me. And here I was, clean, detached, and just barely 35. I forwarded the files to Lena, and within a week, everything was confirmed. It wasn't just money. There were properties. Stocks. A storage facility full of artwork I didn't even know we owned. I stood in the middle of that warehouse one afternoon staring at a canvas worth more than my first apartment, and realized how little I knew about my own history. What my grandfather was trying to protect me from. What he saw coming before I did. Natalie was speechless when I told her. She cried a little. Not because of the money, she never cared about that. But because for the first time, it felt like someone from that bloodline had done something for us, not against us. The trust came with a letter. Typed. Simple. Signed with my grandfather's initials. If they ever choose themselves over you, walk away and don't turn back. I'll be waiting on the other side. I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until I read it. Now we're planning something different. Not revenge. Not a legacy. Just a future. One built not from their rules or expectations, but from the things they never understood. Quiet loyalty. Real love. And the power of walking away.